Good. Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Joanne Swagey with For Better For Worse.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Let
Can you hear
us. I hope you can hear Lisa and Joanne because we're kind of in a different little setup and it's pretty noisy. So let us know that you can hear all of us and we can get started. Today is Ask the Trainers. Ask the Trainers. It's been a long day, people. Different questions, and thank you for those of you who submitted all the questions. It was pretty awesome, and we got a lot of really great questions. I'm hoping we can cover all of them in this hour, but we'll do our best to answer some of the ones we've got. So let us know if you're there, because I don't.
And once again, let us know if you can hear us. So if you're out there, just drop us a little line saying yes, I can hear you, or no,
Yep.
I can't.
Yep. Hello. All right. Well, hopefully you can. Today, one of the questions we had. Hey, Lori, can you hear us? Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. So we're going to start with a question I got from a video, actually, that we had a question about dog to dog interactions. So we're going to address that one first because that one's the simplest, if you will. And it'd be great for you guys to kind of take a look at what that looks like, right? All right, so this is a video we got from one of you, and we're gonna play the video. This is a little playtime. The question here was, this is something to be concerned about, something to worry about with play. So let you watch the video, and the puppy is new. The McNabb is, I think, 1 or 2 years old, and the cattle dog mix is a little older than that. So she's. Oh, of course, we have an emergency. Oh, good. That's good. The emergency ended, you guys. Anyway, so so the puppy's new, and it's obviously it's always a change when um it's always a change when you add a new puppy or a puppy or a dog passes. So anyway, this is kind of the question that they were a little bit concerned about the cattle dog's behavior, and she wanted to know if she should step in or not. Right? That was the question presented. So the obviously McNabb is not gonna um, really correct the puppy. So here's the answer to this one. I think the puppy and the puppy should have playtime, separate playtime with each two of those dogs, so that he learns to have appropriate skills. Even though the McNabb's not really correcting the puppy, but they have a pretty nice play situation, and as a puppy gets older, those things will change. However, with Emma, it'd be probably good for her to teach the puppy some appropriate play and without the third dog situation, because it can become problematic. And she gets a little overstimulated, which is where the humping behavior is coming from, right? With the puppy. So I think having separate play times with each of the puppies is which each of the adult dogs is probably a good option here. What do you guys think? Anything else that you guys saw?
Yeah, I mean, for me, whoops, my mic is muted. You muted me.
I'll unmute you.
Make sure this.
Nope, you can keep me muted.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully you guys can hear me. The only other thing that I would add is if the McNabb really allows that behavior to continue, I would absolutely be stepping in or calling the dogs away, the puppy really, calling
Right.
the puppy away, asking for some focused behavior, some sits, and letting it go. Because you can see what's happening here. And perhaps it's the age of the puppy being so young where the McNabb is being very tolerant. And so you're going to want a little bit more feedback from that McNabb, right? But if the McNabb's not going to give it, then you have to help with that, because that is one of those ways that you can have a bad relationship starting.
Right.
If the McNabb feels like she's being beat up on.
Yeah. So basically, the owner asked if she should step in, and the answer is yeah. Absolutely, because the young puppy needs to learn. Because if the McNabb is not going to interrupt it or stop it, which he may as he gets older. However, you don't want to put that puppy to learn that behavior, because if he learns to do that with his pack at home, he's going to do it to other dogs, and nothing good will come of it. So, anything else, Lisa?
No, I guess I would chime in on the same thing. And the other thing they might consider is if you have appropriate adult dogs that the puppy can spend time with outside of the home might be another option. The hard part would be finding appropriate adult dogs. So I would recommend speaking to somebody who has some that that are will fairly correct the puppy to help teach it appropriate behavior.
Yeah. So yeah. And Deb asked, "Can you teach a dog to give corrections?" No, you can't. Either they're gonna or they're not, uh, or they're going to be appropriate or they're not. So unfortunately, it's something that's either the dog does it or not. But sometimes, like for example, that puppy's really young, and he might lose his puppy license, and then he might get corrected more. Um, but I also would not allow the puppy to do that behavior at this age, because he's really young, and the fact that he's already doing that would be something I would definitely interrupt. So that was her question, if she should interrupt the behavior, and the answer is yep, I totally would.
And I would just say too that that dog's probably not going to lose its puppy license for a couple of months.
Right.
So that is a lot of practiced bad behavior. So.
Right, he's not going to lose the puppy, the for sure. It's not going to uh, uh, the puppy license is still going to be in effect for quite little bit. So I think it'd be best that the handler step in and not allow it to happen, and give separate play times with that puppy and that adult dog. So that was very great question and really good. And the handler is already stepping in, but she wants to make sure she's doing the right thing. So that was great. Yeah, no, you can't teach a dog. You can't teach a dog to how to give corrections. It's really either they can do it or they can't. Like when my Chacha was alive, she was great at giving very very appropriate corrections. But my two young dogs aren't good at it. They're a little over or not at all, right? So, but that's what it is. Okay. Our next question, and I'm not gonna call out people. I have hold on. We had a lot, so thank you guys for doing that. That was really awesome. We had some really good questions, and some of them are going to be a little more extensive. So, one of the questions we have a dog that's aging, and she's now starting to develop storm concerns and worries, and she's now worries about storms where she didn't before. Um, and so basically it's normal. It doesn't happen to all dogs, but sometimes it does. And as long the goal would be for that dog, her frequency of hearing is changing, and over time it'll go away over time. As her hearing adjusts, it'll stop, but for now you want it not to get any worse, right? And so one of the things we would consider is giving her supplements to help her with the stress of storms, because we kind of always know when they're coming. And you can do something holistic, which is what I did with my own dog, and the problem never got any worse. So
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do that. If it does get worse, talk to your vet. They'll help you out with some storm phobia. The other product I really like is that Purina Calming Care, which it is for noise phobic dogs. So if the dog never had any problems before, but it does now, I don't know that anybody's ever used it for that. So
yeah.
But great news is it's not going to hurt your dog. So you could always give it a try. It's not that expensive.
Right. All right. So hopefully that helped answer your question on that. Yeah, and it's temporary, so treat it as such. Right. Any other ideas, Lisa?
I mean, um, I guess some people can talk about counter conditioning and desensitization. You can try that, but I guess at a lower level, there's various things. There's an application right now that you can upload or download, whatever, for sounds and stuff, and it's called Soundproof Puppy. you can try that. You can go online to YouTube to try and get some
Yes.
of that auditory stuff. But the other component you have to identify: is it visual? Is it auditory? Is it kinesthetic? Because in some cases, the dogs will know a storm is coming before we do because the barometric pressure can change. So those are all considerations, right? Identify the trigger if you're able to, and then proceed from there.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw this in there because I had this happen. One of my dogs, as she aged, it was not an auditory thing. It was actually because we didn't have the problem during the day. A storm could roll through at daytime. And what I found out what it was the flash of lightning at night, and it really bothered her. So, but nope, we could have a storm during the day and nothing.
Yeah. So a couple things I would recommend is syntheanine and lactium. The combination is the important piece. Also, I have found some success with Composure Pro too. So all of those things are pretty inexpensive, and they do the trick, especially if the problem wasn't lifelong. If it just started, it seems like we have better success with those supplements. And it's coming, or if you're not sure or you think it might come, give it to the dog before you leave the house and all that. It'll help them. And Chacha's worry about storms didn't last long, and she ultimately eventually it went away, and she wasn't worried about him anymore as she lost that frequency. So it's a temporary thing.
One other thing that some people have done is that anxiety wrap. I don't know if I'd go out and purchase that, but you could also do an actual ACE wrap bandage to test the theory. But I think what's critical is that you need to make sure that you're not keeping it on all the time. You need to apply it when you need it versus keeping it on all the time, because then that can actually it's like a swaddle, but then you can kind of acclimate to it. So that's something else to think about. There's different avenues. It just depends on. Don't throw everything at once, though.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we have a tendency is like more, less is always more, even in life with across the board. So try things little by little and keep a diary about it.
Yeah. And really, I want to emphasize, don't leave the thunder shirt on all the time, because that doesn't work. I mean, the dogs eventually get used to it, and it doesn't matter, right? Okay. Next question. Somebody has adopted a 3-year-old, 12-pound terrier Shih Tzu, and she was worried and anxious when she came to the house in January. And so she's acclimated okay to the woman in the house, but is still having some issues with the male counterpart, with the husband. She barks. She barks at him when he comes home. She barks when he walks around the house. But as of late, on her own, she has gone over and sat on near him. So, and she went to the vet, and it was a male vet, and she was really, that was very traumatizing for her. So she wants her to be better with the husband, and I think it sounds like it's already going that route. And just for those, and Lisa can address it a little more. Just because she's afraid of men doesn't mean she was abused by a man. It could be she had a limited exposure to men. So let's not jump to those. She was traumatized by a man or whatever, because that sometimes is just that she's not really seen men ever in her life, or not a lot, or it's not been, they've not been around, depending on what her life was prior to.
Mm-hmm. In the shelter community, a lot of times too, people do end up, or rescue community, people do think, oh, that dog, somebody did something to her, etc. I think she was abused. I mean, dogs can have lack of socialization. So if they've not been accustomed to men, and my personal example is my dog Simon, who passed away, where I had to say goodbye to him from when he was, he made it to 16, but when he was with quote unquote a breeder, he had very limited access to men. It was only the breeder's father. So that was it. And so, yes, he did have a harder time acclimating to men, but that's a socialization issue. So, what's important is that people understand that it's not always about abuse, it could be just lack of socialization. So, um, doing a lot of like some of the other things you can do probably would be having the, some people, you want to be careful, right? Because if you put too much conflict in it, the dog can then, become aversive to, say, for example, some people say have a feeder and stuff like that. You can do that, but you really need to be aware of the body language to determine how the progression is happening. Because if it's not at all where the dog's hesitant or shows compression when going towards it or takes a cookie and kind of watches the person, that type of stuff, those are things that I would abort mission at that point because it's too much pressure. So it's a gradual process, and I think sometimes people don't think that it should take a lot quicker. I haven't done anything to the dog, so you need to take the pressure off and understand that it's not on your time; it's on the dog's.
Yep. And it sounds like the dog's actually going in the right direction, which is great. So one of the things, like maybe having your husband toss treats in her direction when he's around, and I think you sounds like you guys are doing the right thing already by allowing her to just on her own and on her own time go over and hang out with him. So I think it's already going in a pretty good direction. So having your husband toss really yummy treats her direction when he's around or passes by, and even if she's barking, just have him toss a treat. Don't worry, you're not reinforcing the barking. You're just creating a good association between your husband's presence and good things happening, especially if she's food motivated. So that's one thing I would do. And then just give her, like Lisa said, take the pressure off. She's only been with you maybe 3 months, not even. So give her more time. Because yes, I had a dog that I rescued. She was right at home the first week, and I had another dog that took almost 6 months for him to feel comfortable in my house. So depends on the dog, right?
Yeah. I mean, they've said it already. The only thing I would just reiterate, because you can't say it enough, is toss treats.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if your dog is super food motivated, just because she'll come up and eat a cookie out of your husband's hand doesn't mean that's what you should do, right? Because that puts dogs just in kind of a conflict, right? If I'm dangling a $100 bill and a tarantula in my hand, you might try and snatch it real quick. But it doesn't mean that you're comfortable with a tarantula. You just want the $100. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and definitely toss treats, and don't ask her don't ask anything of her. Just let her come on her own time, right? All right, awesome. So hopefully that helps, and that'll create a good positive. The other thing too, for the person who sent that, if you want to reach out, you can probably do a virtual consult too with any of us, because we can walk you through some of that pretty easily at a distance, and it's not doesn't require because it sounds like it's going well. So we'd be happy to help you with anything else. So you can reach out to us at a later time. Okay. Somebody said, and this is near and dear to my heart, is oops, sorry, is barking. So much barking. A dog that's very sound sensitive and seems to bark at stuff a big part of the day. So, I mean, definitely would have to ask more questions, but to me, it sounds like there's definitely a anxiety component there. Sound sensitivity, but usually sounds like if she's barking, there's a little bit of an anxiety component. So I'd have to ask more questions about that, like
What are the precursors?
right.
Right, for sure.
And
And
have they been doing it for the whole
Like
time,
how
or is
long?
this something new, right?
Age, is there
Right.
something related?
right,
New to you, or
right.
so
Did
you
many
move?
questions.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, did the environment change? Did you open up a window? Are you working from home now and you weren't before? Is she is it is she have access to the window? And things like that. So basically, a dog that's barking and it's so sensitive. Yeah, and how long have you had her? And when did she start that? Like Joanne said, has she done that a long time or? she just start doing it. So there's an anxiety component to sound sensitivity is tough, and ideally, if there's an anxiety component, you really want to address the anxiety component, right? You want to address the underlying anxiety for the dog to help her become a little bit more comfortable and be able to handle, you know, be able to handle whatever's stressing her out or wherever's doing so. I have to laugh. Last time I was in the Georgia airport, everybody comes near me when we're doing the Facebook Live. It's like,
So I'm like,
um, so I need, and I think the person that sent me that is on the call. So if you can answer some of those questions, how long has she been doing it? Does she do it at a certain window and all that? That would help us give you a better plan of attack for that, right? Because I think I saw her name on the call. So yeah, let us know how long has she been doing it, barking. When is there specific times and triggers that she does it? But really, like, how long have you had her, and how long has she been doing that? So while she answers those questions, we got a lot of other questions. Let's see. The one we have a big one. It was a two-parter.
Oh boy.
So, and I thought it was a really great question. One of the question is, what is the difference between relationship-based training and reward-based training? That's a that's a big question. So because and it's a really important and really good questions because those words are used so.
Interchangeably, frequently. Yeah, they're like buzzwords for
Yep.
training.
And people, they sound good and they sound cuddly, and people just think it's the best thing, and they think, oh, it's positive reinforcement and it's a reward, so it's good. But there are people or trainers that they'll correct the dog and then give them a cookie, and they call themselves positive reinforcement trainers, which is that's not it. So
if something happens to my toilet and my toilet gets clogged and the plumber comes over and fixes it and I pay him, I don't have a relationship with my plumber, right?
right.
But I have paid him for a service. So think of it, I think, just at a really high level, think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
We pay people all the time for things that
For
they do
service,
for us,
right.
right? But they're not in my inner circle. They're not in my life,
Right, right. So, positive reinforcement or reward based training is just that, right? If you do this for me, I reinforce you for that. So that, like she said, it's a, you do this and this will, and you will gain this. If you do this behavior, you will get this, the consequences or whatever. You get a cookie or whatever. So that's reward based training. Relationship based training is when you go a little deeper and you consider what the dog is telling you and what the dog is, because we see a lot of training, positive reinforcement too, where we see the people, and the dog is clearly not enjoying it, but they think it's okay because they're giving the dogs cookies.
Mhm.
So, so it's not so just because you give your dog cookies is a feel good for you, but you really still have to see why the what's the dog telling you, right? So and so you're asking, like, is this comfortable for you? Is the dog relaxed? And this is how you learn how to read your dog and be able to understand what your dog's all about. It's no different than when you start dating someone. You kind of you're kind of getting to know them, getting them to understand them, and as you spend more time with that person, you really get to know their little idiosyncrasies and quirks and things like that, right? So just so that's the thing. And some of us, it's a harder road doing relationship based training than it is reward based training, for sure.
I think with the reward based training, I'm sorry, the relationship based training, for me, that's my go to all the time. I want to have a relationship with this individual. That's why I have dogs. And that's first and foremost the most important thing to me. then you identify what it is that's important to the dog. So I think with reward-based training, sometimes we think that this cookie or this kibble should be appropriate when we're training, but then it also definitely matters that.
That was me.
I know, I see.
Sorry.
It totally matters that to the dog. So what I consider as a reward isn't necessarily what's considered reward to me, to my partner. For example, if my puppy is not super touchy feely but likes food, then there's a way to incorporate that. But pretty much, I'm going to say I'm not going to start there because I can teach it to be an aversive, right? So those are things that I look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one more thing to remember here too is reward-based training for a behavior is one thing, but if your dog is uncomfortable with the situation, right, you are allowing them to have the freedom of choice, and that's part of the big relationship, right? So if your kid says, "I'm afraid of the dark, can you leave the nightlight on?"
Right.
No, I give you your allowance this week. No nightlight for you, right? You're just ignoring a request to feel safe and secure and trust, right? And so I think that's kind of what you need to remember is it's not always about 100% compliance. It's about listening and having that connection to hear them say, "I don't like this right now. Like, I'll work through it, but give me a minute." And then you hear that and you give them a minute.
Right. And so it's one of those things that and forgiving yourself, right? Because sometimes in all relationships there's good times and bad times, and being able to sometimes we're going to make mistakes and maybe didn't handle it the way we would have liked, but and it's just we'll try again and try to keep understanding the dog and keeping them what their needs are and what they want first and foremost. So and that's what we try to do, a lot more relationship centered type training, because I feel it's takes you to a deeper level with your dog. So so it's one of those things that that I find that it's a little tougher to work on and train and all that, but it's what we prefer, right? Right. Okay. Susan just asked an interesting question. He's occasionally doing well, where he's licking his pee, and yeah, well, it's an intake male thing. Just interrupt the behavior. It's the best you can do, because yeah, it's a
And what kind of things is he eating?
pica is when they're eating something they shouldn't.
Right.
Not, and it's a pretty bad situation. Pica is. It's not.
Right.
It's not. It's not just licking pee. It's just an adolescent thing.
Unfortunately, that with an intact male, like, welcome to adolescence.
Yeah,
Things
exactly.
changing. So, right, you just want to interrupt it, like she said.
Yeah.
Because the more you allow it to happen, don't get nasty about it, but the more you allow it to happen, then he's like, "Oh, gross."
Yeah.
So
Exactly. The
it's
more you'll want it.
natural, but right, you just don't want, because you never know what's in that. Dogs can be ill, and
Yeah. Yep.
so there's a safety component there too, not just a ew, that's gross, don't do that.
Even though it is, I'm with you.
And then they do the little,
I know.
and then the
Chairs.
foaming. I'm
Yeah.
like, ugh, stop it.
Yeah. No, that's. I have to deal with that myself, so that's always
I got one of those too.
it's great. Okay. Anyway, you went from relationship based training to that, so
To pee
awesome.
licking.
To pee licking.
Everyone around us is like, "What are you talking
Ew.
about?"
Okay. All right. Next question. Don't press the button.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Clicking it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, I know, because we could post the thing. Hard to hear. I know, Terry. I know. This is a tough gig. So
I'm leaving.
yeah. Joanne has to catch a plane, which is why we had to do it this way. Okay. Another question. What are ways to train a dog for mental stamina and nose work, which we do a lot of, and there is a for the dog, and she wants to know before to improve this ability and mental stamina of our dogs and nose work, and how you can tell before they're mentally spent. Well, one of the things is you're going to this is where you're going to use time You're going to work on stuff and work. If you tend to train a lot or a long time, and the younger the dog is, the less training they need, because the less of you can't train a young adolescent a dog um, too long, because they don't have the mental ability to it's like trying to keep a teenager engaged for long a period. You just can't do it. You know what I mean? It's just it's hard. You have to give them you have to give them breaks. So
So hopefully you can hear me better there, Terry. One of the things I just want to put on there, right, just for if anyone's interested, go back and look at another video and look at us tonight, right?
mhm.
So when you think about like everything's a little slower and maybe our eye rate is blinking a little slower and we don't seem quite so bright and interested, we're a little taxed, right? We've spent 3 days together and we're tired. We learned a lot. And so um, you can still do the task. And, just like we'll sign on, we'll do the stuff. But if you really kind of look at the small nuances of behavior, right, we're a little slower tonight. So that's just one of the first signs. It's really hard to see, but
Yeah, and the thing is, you can work some mental stamina with away from nose work, right? Away from nose work, with puzzle games and things like that, and trick training and all that. You're able to work it, and you really definitely want to do some, you know, how does your dog look like if you do 2 or 3 searches? What does that your dog look like at that time, right? What does your dog look like? And does he seem still raring to go, or is he already like he's good and he wants to go lay down, right? Yeah, those are the things you want to look for. If you do a couple of searches, what does he want to do after he's on his own time? Does he go lie down and rest, or does he go, or does he, or does he still want to go, or does he run off and want to go play and do some more stuff, right? That's kind of will give you an idea of if he's able to handle it. And you never want to train a dog to where they're so tired that they're not interested in working anymore. Definitely want to interrupt that sooner, especially for a young dog. Over time and as they mature, it gets easier. But
I'm going to say goodnight.
she's flying back home. Lisa and I are still here, but
Yeah. So have a good night, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Safe travel.
Thank you.
okay, bye.
For me, I think when any kind of work I do with sports and stuff, you have to remember it. Like if you're going to do a marathon, for example, you have to train up to it, and then find your sweet spot where you can still get in the work, build the muscles, and build the stamina for it, and then give yourself a rest. Let your body recover, and then do it over again, right? So I look at things like that. I don't usually drill my dogs. I take my time.
Mhm.
I will ask for more repetitions, give them breaks, etc. So, I think you have to really consider that. And again, watching body language to determine your next steps. Period.
Right, because and remember, the younger your dog is, the you definitely want to, it's like it's no different than trying to get a 5-year-old to read for an hour. It's like, good luck with that. So anyway, so we thought that was a really good question, because you definitely want your dog, especially those of you who do performance, to build that mental stamina. And it does come, some of it does come with age, and some of it does come with some training, but you definitely want to give those dogs a break and be able to handle, so that they can handle a little bit more, as they get older and more mature. So that was another question. So nervous dog training for fears of thunderstorms and fireworks and other loud noises. Yeah, you guys, we were in Georgia doing aggression workshop, so that's why we're in the airport. There goes Joanne.
Bye, Joanne.
Anyway, so thank you guys for putting up with the noise. So nervous dog for fears of thunderstorms. So as we had mentioned earlier, if the dog, and I don't know, Lisa, have you found that dogs that have had a lifetime of worried about thunderstorms, that I mean, you can try some of the more. You definitely want to deal with the anxiety. So putting them on Lactium or Composure Pro or whatever would be helpful. But you also want to do, like Lisa said, some counter conditioning and see if that helps. However, I have found dogs that were born, like had a lifetime, that were born are worried about thunderstorms. I found that over time or at times you have to go to more stronger
Yes.
meds,
Medication. Yep.
right? Different than an older dog
Hmm.
developing thunderphobia, right? And if it's a nervous dog, definitely, there's probably other anxiety issues. So you might want to, anytime there's anxiety present, you definitely want to deal with the anxiety component, because the rest of it doesn't really, you can't fix it if the dog's anxious or whatever. So
I think too, also again, identifying what it is that is in what it is that are the precursors to the behavior. I think that's really important for everyone to understand, because that is not, it's not an easy fix. You have to identify your triggers. And if you identify your triggers, then you need to then address that accordingly. So, um,
yeah, like is it the thunder that's scaring them? Um, and is it, are they worried about fireworks and thunderstorms, stuff like that, right? Like which one is it, or is it the barometric pressure, and are they anxious about other things as well,
right,
right? What other stuff are they anxious or worried about?
right.
So you definitely want to think about those things. But you want, when it comes to any kind of fear based situation, always want to deal with the anxiety component, and how you can, because remember, safety is number one for all animals, right? So if they're not feeling safe, you definitely have to,
Can't change behavior.
you can't change the behavior unless you deal with the, with the with what there is. People come to us all the time with fearful dogs. It's like, you can't train fear away. It's hard. It's like, and depending on what type of fear, sometimes you can improve and all that, but sometimes meds will give us a little help so that they can relax, so that we can get the behaviors, so they can reinforce those behaviors, and then they can, then you can take away the crutch, right, which is what the medication is, to help the dog get to the more calm state. So yeah, Terry, you are right. That is a true statement. That some people, some of the dogs are anxious because people are anxious, but yeah.
Right. I think too, with the sound stuff, it's really tricky, because I think you can see that when you first, if you're selecting a puppy, I think you can see a lot of that stuff. If they're sound aware, how do they respond to it? What is their what happens after they hear it? Do they compress? What do they do with that? So I think sometimes you can see it. And then I do think a lot of times people think you can train it, but it totally depends on the temperament of the dog. So, and the recovery.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and the recovery time. So that
mhm,
really, yeah, so you definitely want to be able to figure out if it's a generalized anxiety dog, or is it just the thunderstorms, because it really matters, right? There's a couple of, and I think we did one on, on noise, so a Facebook live on noise phobias, and there's a Cilio, which is something specific for hearing, that you can use, and you can get that from your vet, and it doesn't, you don't have to be on it all the time, but you would just
as
during,
needed.
as
Yep.
needed, right? So that's something you can consider. So it depends the severity of the dog's, noise phobia, and their, um, you know, what they're worried about. Okay, next question. All right. So here's an interest. This is why we said this was a little more involved. So let's see. She was asking about lovely three golden retrievers. Um, of course, they love people, and uh, when people come over or friends come over, they do a meet. She allows them to do a meet and greet, and then she puts them outside if the weather's nice, or in another location while their family is over. and they always want to be with the people. Um, and if there's no people, they want to be outside, which is pretty funny. Uh, so and they also they start oh and the boys they're males and they bark when people are over and they let them do a meet and greet, but and then they bark when um,
They're away.
they're away. So uh, okay, and they bark when they're away when they're people. Well, um, so I guess my question would be, if you leave them, do they bark the whole time that people are over, or they just bark when they in the initial one?
Right.
That would be a question I would have, right? So in that case, you if they're barking incessantly while people are there all the time, is are they anxious, right, or are they just excited and they don't calm down?
Right.
So that would be a question I would ask, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think again, it depends on the emotional where the dog's state of mind is, right? So if we can determine, are they just excited and being pushy and naughty, or I mean, what is the situation? Because then, and when you have more dogs and they're sociable, it is more challenging. But a lot of times too, it can be perpetuated by the guests. So the guests can actually make it worse, right? And say, "Oh, puppy, I don't mind. It's okay if they jump, and I don't mind." And honestly, like if I have family over, what have you, my dogs don't come out until they're quiet and calm, and then I'll let one out at a time, and then let them, let them, yeah, I know.
Naughty.
They are naughty. But what I'll do is I'll let them out one at a time, and then as they acclimate, then I might let another one out. Sometimes together they can get super sassy, so I might split time out. And again, it depends on age, right? So for me, I have three young dogs. My two older dogs can be out more with everyone because they settle down quicker, whereas the other ones are more like touch me, look at me, da da da. So those are things to consider. What is their frame of mind?
Yeah, and she says her dogs are 7 years old, 4 and 5,
Okay.
so they're a little more mature. So I think I would say it's a realistic expectation for them to be able to learn how to behave. So maybe like Lisa's idea, like letting one out at a time, socialize, and then the other one can come in
Right.
and all that. And then there's got to be a consequence, right? If they aren't quiet, why, then we need to there needs to be a consequence for that, right? If they get to be out, they get to be out and socialize and hang out with the people. So are they able to relax and calm down when there's people around? So you might have to do a little bit of training. Say maybe you have one person over and have them be able to. The girl doesn't care.
Yeah.
Why am I not surprised? Uh,
Miss Independent, right?
um, yeah. So it sounds like the boys are more the issue, right? So then you definitely want you let one boy in with the girl, and let him calm down, and then let the other boy in, and then see, and then they need to be. Yeah, it's just because when you have that many, when you have, because technically it's a pack. When they have that many dogs, they tend to want to, they feed off each other. So you would just eliminate that situation, like Lisa said, let one out, let them hang out, calm down, and let the other one, and then if so they can be together, right? And so the other thing too, Sarah, is how much time do your dogs spend away from each other,
Right.
right? That because that could be part of the issue, right? If your dogs are always together, they're always never apart. They don't spend any time away from the other one. It can create some of that issue, right? Because they want to be together, and it's and I know you think it's a people, but it's like if you try to do one at a time, you're going to get your answer, and they have to learn how to calm down on their own, right? So putting some impulse control on that stuff too, like Lisa said, you're going to wait. And when you settle down, you can come in and visit, and just put a little more structure on what's expected around that environment, right?
I think too, I mean, if you're talking about training it, right? So you can't if I have a big party, I'm not going to pull out all my dogs and be like, okay, calm down. That's not realistic, right? So what I would do is if I have a jumping issue or what have you, I mean, you can, and your guys are a little older, so one of the things you can do is take them out on leash, have them learn how to settle, work on go say hi, and then that type of stuff, and then eventually everybody settles, and then you can start to let that dog out. It becomes challenging when you have multiples, especially close in age, because as Nancy said, they feed off of each other, right? So it just depends how crazy you want to get with your training. If you don't want to work that hard, then manage it. It's your
Right.
choice.
You can manage it, and that which management means they would be in. If you want them quiet, you would put them in there, outside with the bully stick, or put them downstairs in there with a bully stick or a Kong or something, where they give them something to do while you have the guests over, right? So
Mhm.
that's an option, and I've used that. I've done that myself, right, with my own dogs. It's like I'm going to give them something to keep them busy while people are over, and then maybe later on, when things calm down, they can come back out, right, and hang out with the people, right? So that's another option. Same person asked about the harnesses that uh, we like the Freedom harness. What was the other one, Lisa?
The Blue 9 balance harness.
Yeah, the
I,
balance harness. Yeah.
yeah, and basically, the reason why is because of the way they fit the dog. So if you look at some of the sensation harness and so forth, it cuts straight across the shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
almost cutting the biceps, so then it can inhibit motion, which will then affect your dog later and develop different kinds of physical issues. So that's something you want to consider. So,
Yeah.
but that Y neck is a good one.
Yeah. So those are good. And then she says the dog, she's been rushed on her the female has been rushed on a walk twice, and so the other dogs are so there's a bunch of stuff you can do to help her feel safe, but it's too much to cover now. So maybe we will do some defensive leash handling on the next Facebook Live, and we can do some video to talk about it and demonstrate it, because there is some stuff you can do, but I'll give you a quick tip. It's a Patricia McConnell. When you're out and about and you get rushed by a dog, have a handful of treats or a handful of kibble is what I used. When as a dog is rushing you, toss those treats at that dog, and that you'll give you a chance to move away. Hopefully, not always, because the dog it'll startle the dog, and it'll keep him busy eating, um, and hopefully then it'll give you time to get away with your dog, so she won't be worried about it, right? It's a tip when anybody's walking their dog, right? When anybody, and I've personally had to use it. To be honest, when I used to walk dogs many years ago, and I used that, and it worked beautifully. The dog just got busy sniffing and eating the treats, and ta-da, I was able to get away. So
And then the other thing, was it Patricia McConnell? Somebody had talked about using an umbrella.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
So there's like different things that you can do, and obviously defensive handling is important. We came away from that just kind of as a refresher to remember these are things to do on the topic of walking. I personally don't walk my dogs. I'm not going to lie. I live on 3 acres, so they do get plenty of walking. The way my property sits, I can do some off leash work and stuff, but I am super careful to do that. So because I honestly have heard of so many people being bum rushed by dogs, and dogs coming bolting out of houses and hurting other dogs, and that's very scary to me. So I just kind of avoid dealing with that. I mean, another option, when I work with clients, I'll tell them to go to like industrial areas to walk their dogs if you're having those types of issues, so that you can feel safe.
right, yeah, uh, yeah, because um, because it's really difficult. I mean, walking, having like some of our clients that are from Chicago, hats off to them how they can manage that. It's crazy. With all the dogs that are around. Okay, Jodine asked a question. Do dogs' voices change as they get older? Like barking is raspy and grouping sounding? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Jodine, you have a lab. I would definitely, because can develop
Laryngeal paralysis.
yeah, laryngeal paralysis, but sometimes the dogs do change and it's just raspy and it's nothing, right? I would, when you have a chance, get it checked out, but chances are it could be just old age, because just like, and if you think about it, like people who singers, um, as they age, their voices are not the same when they're older. So for some dogs' voices, yes, they change a little bit, especially those that like to bark a lot. So we'll see what Tango's voice does when he gets older.
I know Lucas's voice has gotten a little more,
Raspier,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
which is not it's not unusual or weird or different or anything. It's really, pretty normal. Um, uh, when the for their voices to change a little bit, but especially those that tend to be a little older. Like I have Daisy now, and her
she's raspy.
she's very raspy. she's, but she also barks a lot, so that could be part of the issue too. Um, all right. Other, let's see what other questions. To where dogs stays with me, at a party. Um, yeah, and somebody, the other, for Sarah, this also, somebody recommended that the dog can be tethered to you and all that stuff, which uh, it's harder to do with multiple dogs, but it's an option, and it's really hard because I'm gonna be honest. I don't want to. Uh, that's harder. So you could, but you'd have to do it with one dog at a time, and they'd have to be okay being apart. And I suspect, given that they're Goldens, that might be a thing. I'm just putting it out there. Uh,
And other things you can do in terms of training is you can always look at um, doing a place or a spot. But again, you have to control your
mhm.
stimulus, right? So I'm going to start with one person versus a bunch of people. And then I'm going to weigh the difference between, what's the stimulus, a person coming in, is it direct eye contact, identifying all those little pieces to be able to affect change, because change doesn't just happen
Mhm.
through time and miles. Some things do, but as a rule of thumb, you have to train the behaviors you want.
Right. All right. We have we really appreciate all the
Yeah.
questions. They've been so awesome. Okay. Uh, Here we have one. We have a dog, a year and a half young female Vishla. She gets excited. She bites the other dogs and her and the owner. Um, the other dogs have thick coats, so it's not a big deal. But she does draw blood, so that's over arousal. And she's so yeah, it's you can definitely tell um, I could tell you it's not aggression. I know that.
Like
And
over arousal.
it sounds like over
Mhm.
arousal and uh so anyway, so she's a year and a half old young dog with arousal issues. So a little bit of, Lisa alluded to it, teaching stationing exercises and some impulse control is going to be really important, because that is not aggression, that is just over excitement, and she gets herself in that. So that dog would there would be a lot more impulse control exercises done. So Lisa, could you go what stationing is?
Yeah, so it's no different than, so some people prefer a mat. I personally will use a platform, something elevated, to teach them how value in that, so that, and then the first step is to build the value without any distraction. So remember, you're teaching a new behavior. It always has to be with limited distractions, because the dog, it's like teaching a child who's just learning their numbers how to they're okay, you learned your numbers, now we're going to run into doing division, for example. It's too much too soon, so you have to secure the behavior first in a benign area. Once your dog is able to accomplish that, then you can start increasing different levels, stimulus gradient, right? Duration, distraction, then distance. So once you've built that, you can start to increase some of those distractions as your dog gets better. Then you can start adding a little more distraction, but you always have to break it down. And then as far as impulse control, um, I can't force somebody to calm down. No, you're going to calm down. So that doesn't happen. I can't do that with a species that doesn't speak my language either. So I will work on various exercises to teach them how to keep their wits about them, and monitor their body language to determine which way to move forward with it. If it's too much distraction, then my dog is not going to be able to retain the information. So things to think about in regards to that.
Yep. And so and impulse control is, especially for a young dog, is really hard. So that would mean um, waiting to go outside, really putting some structure around the dog, right? She'd have to, and if that means you have to put her on leash to get her to do some of those initially, that's okay, right? So teaching, she has to wait for her food. She has to um, wait.
Sit, not rush the door, not get excited when you come home, those types of things.
Mhm.
So,
And have her, and then keep her play sessions, and also when she gets overexcited, um, when she gets overexcited, just to stop moving, stop moving, stop the other dogs moving. And I would definitely not let her go after the other dogs.
right.
So that might mean you might have to isolate her a little bit, or maybe only take her out with a dog that she's just a little more respectful of.
Right.
Yeah. So that'll eliminate that. But that's going to be a little bit more work on your end, to work on that impulse control. But I promise, the sooner you can do it, the better you'll be, as a dog gets older. So and so for impulse control, like I said, they'd have to wait to come out of the cage. They'd have to wait to go out the door. They'd have to wait to get dinner. You'd have to really put some structure in there and some routine so that she learns what the rules are, and to slow down some.
I think, and from the rescue or shelter side of things, it's really difficult to control arousal in a shelter. Um, there's lots of barking. There's not much sleep, so then there's less thought into behaviors from the dog. So some behaviors can be affected, but my house dogs, my own personal dogs, I have different kinds of rules for, and it's not that it can't be done. The problem is sustaining those behaviors and having multiple people practice the same thing, right? So having multiple handlers will also present a challenge in that regard. So some people say, well, I don't mind if they jump on me. But I do, right? So those are things to think about. I don't mind if my dogs go running out together in the yard, crazy, blah, blah, blah. And some people do. So it totally depends. But
Yeah.
age is totally a factor in this.
Right. And so the other thing is, if like, for example, if she jumps or tries to jump up and nips you when she's coming in from playing outside, then interrupt those play sessions a little bit. Interrupt them so that she doesn't get that high, right?
Absolutely.
And then stop them, do some sits and downs, and then let them go back on and play. And that's a good skill for when you have multiple dogs anyway.
Right.
So to work on. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Our last question was about AKC Buried. In AKC Buried, can distractors be on the container or leaning on the container? Yes, it can. They can't be on the container that had a hide in it, um, but they can actually be on top or nearby the containers. Yeah, absolutely. That is yes. That is a correct thing. So so they you are allowed to do that. It could be, it's just would never be on the container or leaning on the container that had a hide in it. So that's the only thing. It shouldn't anyway. But yeah, they can be on or near on the buried. Absolutely, that is legal. So yeah, you missed a hide. I'm not sure if it was the one above. Yeah, it might have. And that's and Gloria, I know how you feel, because Tango sees a toy, he's very excited about it. And he would love nothing more than to play with it, and has at times. Um, but but yeah, it's something that it can be on or near the container. So something to definitely train um, train it when you're, and I from distractions and having uh, toys and stuff in nose work and all the, it's just good training anyway. Just do it all the time anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so that it just so for the dog it won't be a big deal, won't be a thing. So it's easier. All right, I think I got to all your questions. I think we got to all your questions. Thank you for all those awesome questions. They were
Mm-hmm.
wonderful, and we really appreciate them because it gives us things. Um, it gives us things to think about and what's out there, and it'll give us some ideas for future Facebook lives, like
Yeah.
one on defensive handling and all that. Hi, Jill. We're in Georgia. we went. We came to see an aggression seminar. Even though we work with a lot of aggression, we came. We haven't been to a behavior seminar in a long time, so and we're seeing a lot more aggression as probably you have, and so we are working on continue keeping our chops nice and sharp,
Yep.
because we're seeing a lot more aggression these days. So just interesting. Uh, just keep make sure we're still on top of it, and we still know, we're still, there's nothing new there. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. It was great, and forgive us for the noise distraction and because we're at the Georgia airport. There's only so much we can do, but we gave it a try, and we will hopefully. I think we're going to try to get a transcript of this so that we can. So that you can see the answers that we had, because I think some of the questions were awesome,
Right.
just excellent. So, all right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.